Hello, welcome to this introductory to Lightroom demo that's going to correspond with your eggs. So we're going to open up Lightroom Classic to start off. Let it load. So your Lightroom, if you haven't opened it before, may not look like mine. I have something that I worked on previously down here, but I need to create a new catalog. One moment. Okay, so what we're going to go, if you go to File, you have all sorts of different things, but we're going to go to File, New Catalog. I like to make a new catalog for each sort of demo that I work on. And going through my folders. I like my folders by date, year, month, date. Save as Lightroom demo. So it's going to close out and then open back up again. And now I have a new Lightroom catalog to work with. So I don't have any photos imported. Remember that it works kind of like a linked path where it looks at where your photos are in your folder structure. Remember this in this previous video. And then it works to edit them from there. So we're going to go to File, Import Photos and Video. So you can see I have my breadcrumbs here. Go. And since everything's in a folder structure, I know exactly where everything is. You can uncheck, but typically I like to include everything. So I'm going to import. And I have images down here and through here. I can use my space bar to kind of make them big and thumb through. If I like things, I can say yes and give it a flag. If I don't like things, I can also give them ratings. And do some preliminary saying like, oh, no. No. Editing. So I can take something like this and say, this is actually pretty good. Give it a 5. Something like this. Just say that because I know I can fix it. And what you can do, you can view, you have to change your view options, but you can filter through here and say rated, unrated, flagged, to really kind of pick which ones you want to narrow down. So if you shot 300 images, you can use Bridge to narrow down, or you can use Lightroom. And this is where you can rate it 1 through 5 to say, yes, this is something I like or don't like, something I kind of like, and then you can narrow down. So this is sort of your editing in the first process. So what you can do is with ones you like, and I can say, I need only 3 stars better. I can go to my next tab, which is Develop. So this looks kind of familiar because we kind of worked like this when we worked in Camera Raw. We have our histogram, our blacks, shadows, midtones / exposure, highlights and whites. We have these sliders that look familiar. So let's start with this picture. It looks pretty okay. It's the inside of my fiance's fridge. And yeah, what I first will do is I want to look at exposure. And I think it's better to look at exposure when you're not looking at color, so I'll go to black and white. This way I can say, do I have a full range of tones from black to white? But look at my histogram, it's kind of heavy over here and not over here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll take my exposure. This will just pull those midtones up a bit. Alright, it brightens it a bit. But, so we have a better histogram. But we don't have any pure whites. And we may not have any pure blacks. So I'll take my highlights and pull them up. And I'll take my shadows, maybe not too much. But I can take my blacks to really kind of richen everything up. And I'll just use the highlight shadows, blacks and whites when I'm working in the black and white. I think it's better just to take everything to black and white so you can look at just the tones. Then you can take it to color and really evaluate. So if I go to this YY, this is what it was before and this is what it is now. So I've actually improved it quite a bit. You can see half and half. You can kind of filter around and say, wow, you know, I really improved this just by looking at exposure. It didn't seem like it took too much, but it did. Next is white balance. So if you have a neutral in your scene, like before, we can just take this eyedropper, click on a neutral, then it white balances out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's a little cool, just warming up a hair. Just a hair. Tint, so this is something that looks kind of blue and magenta. I always say take it to the far end, step it back. So we've done so much exposure really quickly. We have texture, clarity, and dehaze. So they kind of do different things. So your clarity kind of adds depth to the image by increasing the local contrast. So I always just kind of add it a little bit. It adds a little sharpening. Texture, I think, you take it all the way, it makes it look a little too crunchy. Take it the other way, it looks like a bad soap opera. So I usually actually don't touch it. And dehaze, same thing. Then you have vibrance and saturation. So vibrance sort of looks at, like before, those things that are kind of muted. We've got some really strong colors here. Take it all the way in, it's kind of cartoony. And you take it all the way, it's kind of like muted. Take it down a little. And saturation, if you add color, it's just really colorful. You can just take it away. Usually I don't play with saturation. So that is sort of quick and dirty. There's so much more things, like going into specific colors and saying, you know, I really want the blue to read more green in this photo, or read more blue. I'm going to go with a little bit more green. Just to kind of give it a pop and contrast against that orange from that Reese's bag. But you're looking at specific colors, and hue is sort of the color amount of how much color, whether it is changing it, so whether it's like more green blue or more like rich blue. Saturation, again, is the vividness, and luminance is the brightness. And that's how you can really adjust your color. Detail, you can add some sharpening. This really does edge detection. We'll do a sharpening demo later on, which I prefer to do my sharpening in Photoshop. If I scroll up, you have a tone curve. So we'll talk about curves when we do the adjustment layer demo. But this is, again, like your histogram. You can pull things up, pull things down. Typically a nice S curve is what you want, but I don't like what it did to this image. I'm just going to undo. But you can really kind of play with it differently here. So we're going to look at another image. I'm going to show you another thing. So we have these little dots here, these little triangles, and these are our clipping elements. So if I go to black and white, anywhere where it's blue, it's clipped. Anywhere where it's red, it's clipped. So you don't want to have no detail, and you don't want to blow out your highlights. So there is detail here. So I'm looking just at my midtones. I think that's about right. But I may take my blacks over, and my whites I can push a bit more. Typically I like to take it to just about the edge of where I can't take it anymore. I usually don't touch my contrast slider, and I work with the highlights, shadows, blacks. A little clarity. Shadows, I want a little bit more detail in my shadows. I want to see that texture. Take it back to color. The coloring is way off. So we did black and white. Looks like a good black and white image. Take it to color. It's cyan. It's so cyan. So I can use my eyedropper for a quick fix. So something that was the wrong white balance in the beginning, you can correct in post, especially if you're shooting camera raw. So let's actually look at a few more images. If I go back to library, I'm going to click these dots and do filters off. I'm going to import some more photos. Maybe photos where we don't have an egg in it. You're only going to be submitting eggs for this demo, but I kind of want to show you real life action with it. So we have this pool scene, this gross looking pool. Alright, so it's not bad. Let's take it to black and white. Alright, so I see some good contrast, but you can actually take this up here and shift it over here. I have my clippings on. Alright, that's looking pretty good as a black and white image. Highlights are a little up. Go back to color. Alright, so I don't have something neutral. If I do that, it kind of makes it green. So I have to work on my sliders. It's real subtle. You may take it all the way and edge it back. There we go. There we go. So real subtle. The first picture actually wasn't too bad. But the new one updated is, take off this clipping. It's a little better. I don't think it's a great photograph, to be honest, but I've improved on it. More neutral. It's not as warm looking. It's actually a little cyan. Does need that warmth because the reflection was cyan. But I can take my reds down and take my orange down to really neutralize just that. So previously he was here, but I was able to neutralize just that. Not bad. Let's do all photographs. So let's say I want to export everything I edited. Do a command click. And I have the ones selected. And I want to export. So I can click this export icon down here. Export to, I always like to do a specific folder. I'll make a new folder. So what I can do is actually even rename it here. Custom name sequence. Or I can just write typically I like to rename in Bridge or just rename in Finder. For image format, so I typically like to save as PSD personally because I like to take everything out of Lightroom into Photoshop. If Lightroom is your end-all be-all, just keep it as JPEG. But if you want to work on it in Photoshop, I would save it as a PSD. But JPEG is fine. Color space, I always leave it as sRGB. Quality 100. And you can make your resolution here 300. I can do resize to fit, but I don't need to make it smaller. I can just leave it as is. Resolution 300. And I can click export. So in your right hand corner, it will show you your files exporting. And depending on how big they are, it may take some time. Once your files are exported, you will see them in your folder location. And your processed images will be here. You can check them out. Now remember, we're only processing your egg photos for this demo, but you're welcome to use either Photoshop or Lightroom for processing the rest of your photos. Definitely play with both. I've also linked some extra tutorials. So have fun. If you have questions, please ask, and I'll see you later.